I'm happy the conversations are happening, and at an even deeper level, the thoughts and verbalizing the thoughts behind why it feels awkward should I greet, because it also acknowledges a history that we share that we never get a chance to talk about. So really happy to be part of something where we unpack these things, we talk about it, and we also get to hear your side of it, because I think a lot of conversation is happening from the black side or the previously disadvantaged side. We're never having these conversations and understanding how white people are feeling.
Welcome to Colourful, a podcast where Black people and white people share their personal stories and experiences in an attempt to help us to understand one another better. My name is Stacy Jane, quite clearly white mom to my two adopted Black children. I live in Cape Town, South Africa, and my hope and my vision with this podcast is to bring forth the stories that it feels like we are having in separate spaces and perhaps confront those stories together. I am very excited and nervous because today is the first ever episode. So thank you guys for joining, and thank you to my guest, Kuhle Belu, longtime friend, colleague, and amazing human who has joined me to discuss quite a simple and yet actually, as it turns out, complex behavior that white people do.
So I'd never heard of the term snake smile before, but when I learnt about what it was, I realized that it's something that I do very often. It's a very familiar expression, that smile. It's almost like it's a gesture of acknowledgement, but like that's where the line ends. No, kind of it's not trying to make a connection. It's an acknowledgement and kind of that's it.
The snake smile, the fake smile, I think the trick is in how quickly you do it, right? It's very quick. If somebody who's not used to it or seeing it for the first or experiencing it for the first time, it's like, whoa, wait, what was that? Was it intended for me? You look back, there's nobody else. Oh, okay, so it was intended for me. So is it a, hey, how's it going? How you doing? Or is it a, hi, I see you? I never quite understood what it is or what it's about.
Welcome to the first episode of Colourful, a place where Black people and white people kind of share our stories so that we get to understand each other a little bit better. And we thought, what a place to start, or why not start rather, with this kind of super odd behavior that not many people tend to be able to diagnose when I first tell them about it. And that is the snake smile. So in actual fact, when I talk to Black people and I mention the snake smile, exactly as my guest today has just done, there's a big laughter and everybody tends to know exactly what I'm talking about. When I mention it to white people, there's kind of like a bit of a confused look, and then it takes a while and they're like, oh yeah, actually I think I do that thing. I do think I do that thing. And so we thought we're going to start with that today. So here to help me is my long-term friend and colleague. She currently works in marketing for one of the biggest global snacking and beverage brands in the world. Long-time friend, Kuhle Belu, welcome to our first episode of Colourful. It's super cool to have you here. And I feel like now would probably be the inappropriate time for me to give you a snake smile. So I'm going to be totally authentic and give you the real smile and say thank you for joining and welcome to the first episode.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I think before we get started, do you want to give us a little bit of a background as to who you are, and also maybe some thoughts around why you want to be here today sharing in this kind of a conversation?
Cool. So as you've said, my name is Kuhle Belu. I'm 39, turning 40 this year. I'm very excited. I'm a mom of two. I'm married. I live in Cape Town. I call home the Eastern Cape, in Tanzania, where I was born. Married into the Transkei at Dujwa. So as much as I'm Cape Town based, I'm an Eastern Cape girl. And I think part of the interest with having this conversation is having grown up in South Africa and working in spaces that are multicultural. There's a lot of instances where culture and race and politics impact us in ways every day. And I'm really passionate about making a better future for my kids so that they don't have to grow up with some of the really awkward situations that we have to fight through and live through today. So very happy to have this conversation so we can talk about the things that impact us in our daily lives, and come together, and so that our kids don't have to live in this world that's still a little bit imbalanced, still iffy, and we're not having the real conversations. And we have the chats in our WhatsApp groups, and best believe even in the workspaces there's WhatsApp groups driven by race or different or cultures or something that brings people together outside of the work situations. We're having those conversations, just not together. And you're not the only one. I think you're probably brave. These conversations are living, but we're having them with not the right people and probably not in the right forums. And stuff like integration and how races and gender plays up within leadership, etc. Those aren't conversations we're having with white males, as an example, unless there's an openness to the conversations, or there's a time that has been very well carved out to have that kind of information. But day to day, the conversations are happening in authentic ways that you just can't replicate in an office space. And I still want to hear the people that are in those WhatsApp groups probably closing their eyes, me exposing everything.
Exactly. Those are the people I want to chat to as well. So that's cool. And having a conversation. Okay, so let's start with something that feels so common, right? So here's the picture. So you've got a white person, it tends to be a white person, walking past a black person that they don't know. And there's this moment when you're like, oh, I need to acknowledge, do I acknowledge, don't I acknowledge? What does it end up with? You know what it is, Kuhle. And so I want to talk about the umlungu snake smile today. When I bring it up, people don't realize it has a name. I think I, somewhere along my investigations, named it the snake smile. So let's go with that. And if you're looking for a hashtag, that's what it will be, hashtag snake smile. So Kuhle, tell me, have you experienced the snake smile?
Of course, and I am hard pressed to find anyone of color who has not experienced it. Please tell me who you are. It's something we live with, and it's actually a bit of a joke. I love the fact that it's got an actual name, but yeah, it's the.
Why do you think we do it?
I always feel like it's a reaction to wanting to acknowledge a person, but also wanting to create like a little bit of distance in terms of, hi, I see you, but also I'm not sure I want to engage. And sometimes it is I have interpreted it to be, please don't hurt me, I'm good, I just don't want to sort of engage. And there's a discomfort with the person, and the natural reaction is to do like the smile, to communicate, I see you, but I also don't want to engage and move on, which is very different to how I encounter people. And for me, it's very much a white lady thing, for the most part, but I've also seen it with people of color. And for me, and right now I'm going to make a value judgment on those people that I have seen do it. It always happens with like people I perceive to be richer, they're doing well in life, but there's also some level of distance culturally from where they come from, if they're black or if they're Indian or if they're colored. The natural thing is to greet and acknowledge a person, look at them straight in the eye, or at least acknowledge them in a very direct way. And when I've encountered that with people of color, I always perceive it as they've moved on to the other side. They've become so westernized, they've almost picked up almost like white behaviors in the I acknowledge you, but not in the way that culturally it would have normally happened.
So tell me a bit about, you were saying culturally it's not natural that we would have this kind of awkward interaction. Let's say you meet someone just like you, also a person of color walking down the street. When you say naturally we're meant to act a certain way, what would that look like?
And again, I'm not going to speak for all black people. I'm speaking to you as a Xhosa person that has grown up culturally Xhosa amongst other people as well. greeting is something, and there's even sayings in Xhosa language to say it costs you nothing. It's almost expected that you would acknowledge a person, whether you know them or not. And the way we greet is molweni, and usually followed by kunjani. And it doesn't necessarily mean now you must have this long conversation about how are you, but it's just so natural to say molweni njani. And you walk past, and this acknowledgement of the person is respectful, and also doesn't require a level of closeness to anyone for it to be there. So for me, it's really wild, and I mean, I've been working in integrated spaces. It's still wild when people come into a room and don't verbally greet. But I also understand the perspective of the other culture, where I also understand that it's not normal or natural. So I mean, I get it, I understand it, but for me, it's morning, how are you? Sit down. And for others, I will accept. People walk into a room and do a sit down, and for me, I receive it as I would have given it. But it is different.
So I chatted with a couple of white women on the side. I'm obviously a white woman, surprise. And I chatted with a white woman to kind of get a sense for why we do what we do. And actually, I think you've more or less hit the nail on the head. So to kind of share a bit of feedback on what I've spoken to women about is we're in the situation where we're walking past someone, and that moment does offer an opportunity to either acknowledge someone or not, but you're not sure if your acknowledgement is going to be wanted or accepted, or I think there is so much that draws on our past. Like, should I be greeting this person? Do they even want to hear from me? Do they want to kick me in the face? Like, am I going to be accepted in that moment if I acknowledge them? And so it comes across as that weird half grimace, half smile thing. And so now what's happened is, in chatting to these women, we've all become very conscious of our behavior, and so I want to ask you another question. Yeah, exactly. You know where I'm going with this, right? So we've become quite conscious of our behavior, and now I see someone and I immediately want to jump to. Actually, I didn't realize about boy wedding, so I would molo Jani, but then I panic, and what happens if they're not closer? What happens if they're Zulu? Can I still greet someone? Like, should I be saying sawubona? Or that doesn't matter, and now I'm catching myself, and I'm like, molo, hi. I'm like, what do I do?
And to be honest, you're not the only one. So, for example, even amongst Black people, there's lots of differences, and the same kind of thoughts go through your head. If I'm in Joburg, which is one of the most cosmopolitan, it's the most mixed province that we've got, I still feel awkward as a Xhosa person going molweni ninjani or molo, because I could be speaking to a Zulu person, I could be speaking to a Swana person, and some of them do get offended by a Xhosa greeting in Johannesburg, and they would have preferred something else. I can't tell. All I am doing is acknowledging to the best of my linguistic ability, and it's the same thing. But I also don't think that I probably harbor the same weight and thoughts behind it as you do, in terms of, oh my God, should I greet, and it's natural. And if it comes with a why, molweni versus sawubona, I'm happy. I'll be happy to go, sorry, sawubona, but also I'm just like, it was a greeting, no malice intended. So I think I'm happy the conversations are happening, and at an even deeper level, the thoughts and verbalizing the thoughts behind why it feels awkward, should I greet, because it also acknowledges a history that we share that we never get a chance to talk about. So really happy to be part of something where we unpack these things, we talk about it, and we also get to hear your side of it, because I think a lot of conversation is happening from the Black side or the previously disadvantaged side. We're never having these conversations and understanding how white people are feeling. And again, it might be you guys probably don't feel like you want to center yourselves, but I think having the conversations even amongst yourselves is helpful to us.
Thanks, Kuhle. Thanks for that acknowledgement. That's really cool. I want to ask you something that you brought up earlier about greeting across. It's almost social class, except it is and it isn't, because it's somebody who you've described as rising up through the ranks, and now they're almost kind of westernized. Have you noticed this quite a lot, or is this something you're only recently coming to see?
No, and it's complex. I think with social mobility, in most cases, there is an assimilation to whiteness that happens. And I'm going to make a bold statement and say across people of color. But again, I want to be clear that I'm speaking from the perspective that I understand, which is Black Xhosa woman, that is Black, living in South Africa. We're always asked or forced to assimilate in certain spaces, tone down a little bit of of our own cultural behaviors, because we are working in spaces that are predominantly white. But this is where I was saying, when people become distant to their cultures, they assume a lot of the white behaviors, and that becomes normalized in their world. So when people don't greet coming in, they might have been having a bad day. But from a cultural perspective, at least as a Xhosa person, there's no bad day that will allow me culturally to walk into a room and not greet. People don't care. I also know that I can't do that. And if I do it, I'm being insolent and I'm being stubborn and actually not being human in that moment. So not to say that it doesn't happen. We're constantly balancing and being fully Xhosa, fully Black all the time. But what I'm saying is there is an assimilation that starts to happen when people move up the social ladder, and maybe they don't go home as often as possible, to again balance what is cultural, what is considered normal in their culture, and your corporate self, or and I'll call it modernized self, becomes the new culture and way of doing things, where it's okay not to greet. It's okay to do like a little thing that acknowledge, and I don't want to demonize the snake smile, because it is a way of acknowledging the other, but coming from a Black person, it's a very Western or very white way of acknowledging people. So it happens a lot, because I am living in Cape Town. I am moving in mostly white spaces, and so that becomes a little bit normalized in sort of my corporate life, but it still feels very white.
So now listen, how we want to create a tradition in this podcast is that we kind of end off by saying, okay, so help me color between the lines. So if we are in this moment where you and I, who we now know each other very well, but let's say we didn't, and we're about to walk past each other, what would you like from me?
Look, and I've thought about that, and I also don't want to make or create a situation where people's normal doesn't feel real or isn't acknowledged as their culture. So for example, I don't want to ask white women to be anything other than white women in relating to me or my fellow dark-skinned sisters and brothers. So I acknowledge it, that, and to be fair, it doesn't bother me. If I can maybe answer your question in a different way, it doesn't bother me, especially nowadays, because I also acknowledge the human in you that's trying to bridge a gap, not knowing what's appropriate, what's right. And so I acknowledge the tension. My only wish is that that tension didn't have to exist. If you want to smile, smile. If you don't want to say hello, that's still fine. And if it's not in your culture, in your roots to talk to strangers or to say hello, I also get that. So to be honest, I just wish that everyone would be comfortable to live their experience without needing to change themselves in order to, because it's also burdensome. And I, as a black person, don't want to burden people of other cultures to assimilate to my culture, because it's not nice. I have to do that in my everyday. I certainly don't need other people to do it. So I think maybe the answer is, I really hope we can live in a space where we can both understand what's normal to each other and allow ourselves that normalcy. So if you wanting to acknowledge the person for you is a I see you, a nod is okay. It's also acknowledgement. I don't need you to figure out my language, sawubona, molweni. Whatever is comfortable to you, and if you want to show respect and you want to show proximity by speaking the person's language, which is powerful. I love it when people, and I appreciate the effort that people take to talk to me in a way that feels special to me. Do it, and I promise you, things become easier. And actually, people are so appreciative of the effort. And maybe when you walk past a stranger, you don't have that time to say, appreciate the effort. But I think the more you do it, the easier it will get. And maybe you'll get some people to say, Kujani, and you'll fumble your way through it. But I think it's not living with the burden of needing to get it right or needing to do something specific. It's cool, guys. It's cool.
It's like amazing advice. Thank you,
Yeah.
Kuhle. Of course, Stacy. Really.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kuhle, for joining me for the first ever episode and for having such a meaningful conversation with me. And thank you to the listeners for joining for that first ever episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please could you subscribe to the podcast, like it, comment on it, and share it with your community. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at _StacyJane_. And I'm looking forward to sharing stories with you and hearing from you as we journey this together.